Growing up, I didn't think I would ever leave D.C. It wasn't like anyone ever told me I couldn't. It was more like my life had been decided for me long before I had a say in it. Chocolate City was home. In the 1970s, it was people who had come up from down the country and brought with them traditions that connected them to each other and the earth. My neighbors were just like me and my family, black, working class, getting by. We raised chickens and shared the wisdom of canning vegetables and planting collard greens. Growing up in a city that was more than 70% black meant safety. D.C. was far enough south to be country and far enough north to be safe from the discrimination that existed in the Deep South. It was also two cities, black and white. In the 1980s, the city's borders began to open and the world came to D.C. Suddenly, you could hear snatches of a new language, Spanish. It was the Reagan years. Here, there was rampant homelessness, unemployment, and a love boat epidemic. In Central America, it was hunger, torture, and desaparecidos. But instead of living separately like blacks and whites, the Central Americans lived side by side with African Americans, tentatively and often violently. Fresh out of high school and unsure of what we would do next, my friend Kike, who had come from El Salvador when he was 12, and I decided that we had something to say. We were the survivors of political decisions that favored the rich and kept the poor locked up in communities that were always on the verge of exploding. And we were frustrated. Frustrated at the society that limited our options and at the strangers who said that the difference between black and brown should keep us from being friends. Our weapon of choice was the theater. Our dialogues came directly from the people we were part of, the stick-up and drug boys, undocumented families, crack mothers, AIDS patients, and runaways. We didn't just make art. We made art that spoke for those who didn't have a voice. That was 25 years ago. Many of the Central Americans who came in the 1980s now call D.C. home. But now it's me who's crossing borders. Guatemala is the closest thing to home that I have right now. I never thought that I would actually be living in Central America, but in retrospect, it was probably inevitable. Everything that I believe about social justice took shape when the segregation I grew up with began to unravel, and I realized that there was more between us than separates us. Why Guatemala? That's the question that people ask on both sides of the border. Believe it or not, it reminds me of where I was born. Not the city of strangers that D.C. has become, but the one that raised me. The city of working people getting by, who shared traditions that connected them to each other and the earth.